All right, so welcome back to the second part of my watercolor painting demonstration. When we were last together, I had put some sky down, working back to front, and my sky color had been made using my blue, and I neutralized it with a little bit of orange, because again, we want to rarely use colors directly from the tube. We want to enrich them by mixing them together. So I neutralized my blue and I put that down. Now you had seen me put just one layer. Since that time, I have applied 2 more layers of watercolor. You can see it's still very faint. I want to slowly build. You can see that building in the painting. You don't want to just put too much pigment right down. You want to make sure you have about 95% water, 5% pigment. If you look at my palette, you could still see that my little wells of paint are still pretty much untouched. All of this, these puddles, this has been creating the painting that I have here. I went back and I added some more into my ocean. I was adding some blue into, some green rather, into my blue to get some sort of an ocean color. And I was leaving some spots of white to show the currents. Remember, we don't want to use white paint. Rather, we want to plan where not to paint. Now, I have also started putting in the distance, my tree line. I wanted to have a cool green, so I added some more blue into my green because cool colors recede, and I wanted to make sure that this was feeling like it was pushed back. I also added a little bit of yellow ochre because I wanted to have some hints of light into it. Now, when we paint with green, you want to usually add some red into the green because most greens in nature have red in it. That's again neutralizing the green. Now here I have on my palette, I have a yellow ochre based green where it's mostly yellow ochre with a little bit of my Viridian U put into it. Now here we have some Viridian with some alizarin crimson and some cadmium red. And you should have these colors as well. And then I have my darker green. My darker green, I have more alizarin crimson in there. And I've also added a little bit of my blue into here. So I got a darker green. I'm going to start laying out, even though I like to paint back to front, because it's such a dominant part of my painting, I'm going to start layering and laying out my leaves. Okay? So I'm going to, again, you can see how light and fluid it is. And I'm going to paint using the drip. I don't want to push too hard on the paper. Watercolor paper has a beautiful thing called a tooth. That's that texture. And if you brush really hard, what happens is you take the tooth away. Right? You brush the tooth away. So we want to instead just take this little drip. I'm going to push this little drip around. And I am going to start layering this darker green into some of my leaves. I don't want to do them all. I don't want to do them all the same color. All right. Again, later on, I will probably enrich these colors. I will add layers of other paint on top of sections, and I'm going to want to make them deeper. You don't want to just add too much pigment right away. We want to slowly build. So you could see I'm starting to layer in these leaves. Now, some of my background here where I painted the trees off in the distance is still wet. So I want to make sure I don't actually go near that because that's going to do a wet on wet method and it'll alter the color. I might do that later, but not right now. Right now, I'm just putting in some of the leaves. When it dries, it should look a little bit lighter than when it does right now. And you could see, if you're up close in the painting, you could actually see that the water's raised up. You could see that drip that's on there. Now, I try to make sure I have enough paint in my little puddles so that I could at least do one coat. I don't want to run out. I mean, I could mix the same color, but I would prefer not to run out. Now, some leaves are going to be angled a different way, so some will be lighter and some will be darker. So I'm going to use this other puddle here to do some leaves in a moment. I'm not going to do all the leaves. I'm just starting to set it up. Just a placeholder. All right, at this point, I'm going to switch. I'm going to clean my brush a little bit, and I'm going to switch to this other green here. This was the green that I pretty much used for my background. I might put a little more of a blue glaze, a blue layer later on to my background to really push that further back. And what I could do is I could use the same kind of sky color, and I could go right over this tree line with that sky color, and that's really going to make it feel more pushed and a part of the atmosphere. It's going to be more of the atmosphere of the sky in it. So now I'm putting this other green in some of these leaves, trying not to touch at the moment while it's wet. I don't want these to touch yet. I might have them touch later, but right now I'm leaving just a little halo around these leaves so they don't touch each other. All right, so this is step two. And you can see what I've been up to, and I'll bring you back later and you can see what I've done, and we'll talk about the decisions I made.